Hey, welcome to CheaperJeeperTV. I'm Dino, your host. Glad to see you here. In this episode, we're getting ready to go winter camping next weekend. In fact, when you're watching this video, I'm actually going to be camping. Now, for that trip, I wanted to upgrade my diesel heater, and so in this episode, I'm going to talk about why I wanted to upgrade it. I'm going to talk to you about what I'm going to do to it, and then I'm going to show you how it works. And then in our subscriber segment, we have a video from a subscriber, so stick around. Okay, so why did I want to upgrade the diesel heater that I use when I go winter camping? Well, let me show you. This is why. It's a little bit cumbersome. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so this is the panel that I connect to the Jeep window to direct the ducting into the Jeep to help keep me warm. And then, of course, all the associated plumbing, or venting, I should say. And it's 4-inch venting, and I've got these quick connects, and I run it into the Jeep as well as into our tent. And you'll see as I take these out, they are a little bit cumbersome and they do take up a little bit of space. Let's have a look. Here we have the splitter, which is a bit cumbersome. This is what directs the heat from the heater into the tent and the Jeep. And then this is the vent that I use to go into the tent. And then this is the vent that goes from the splitter at the heater up into the Jeep. So you can see the 4-inch tubing and the quick disconnects take up a bit of space. And then finally, the beautiful diesel heater. I'm really happy with it in that it works really well. It's been very reliable. It's just a little bit awkward. You can see that I have the 10-liter fuel tank that came with the unit, and I don't need that much fuel. So one of the thoughts I had, of course, other than maybe go to smaller tubing and get rid of those cumbersome quick connects, is to go to a smaller tank. It'll make carrying this unit a little lighter, and maybe it'll be more compact. So let's put this stuff away. So if you wanted to know how to make that heater in a box, there's videos that I made on the design and the construction, and I showed it in use in a couple videos, and it is really good, but I wanted to improve it. So in the video a couple weeks back, I talked about how I would go to using 3-inch ducts, get rid of the quick disconnects, use a smaller tank, and then perhaps a case where I could fit things in a little bit more compact. I discussed how on Amazon there was a suitable case, or in Canada we have Princess Auto. It's sort of like a Harbor Freight in the States. And so I started ordering some parts to begin the build. And so I decided I would just go to Princess Auto to pick up the crate where it was the wider base, because I kind of like the idea of the heater having a wide and flatter profile, so there wouldn't be any risk of it getting knocked over. And you can still get a similar case on Amazon as well. However, on the way, I passed by a hardware store and I just thought, why not just check to see if they have one that fits the bill? So here's what I got. Okay. Now, the difference is, this isn't one of those really excellent quality $100 plastic boxes. I kind of thought to myself, well, I am CheaperJeeperTV, and this is only 30 some odd dollars plus tax. That's a big savings compared to spending $100 plus tax on those other boxes that I discussed. But it's up to you. This is definitely not the same quality as those that are $100 plus, but for 30 some odd dollars, it had the right measurement, so I thought, well, I'll give it a try. So looking at the sticker on the toolbox, it says that it's 17 1/8 inches wide this way. It's 13 1/2 inches this way, so both the heater and the 5-liter fuel tank, which I have, should fit. And then it says it's 8 1/2 inches tall, and the highest point of that fuel tank is just over 7 inches because of the lid. So let's try and see how things fit. So here is the 5-liter fuel tank that finally came in. So that fits right in the case. And here's the diesel heater. Now the plan is to stick these vents going out of the side of the box so that the exhaust pipe and the intake pipe don't take up any space in the box. I just attach them when I want to use it, and then when it shuts down and cools off, I can take them off. So for our purposes right now, I'll just sit the box this way. And there you go. They fit nice and snug in here. And if you did watch the video from 2 weeks ago, I used a digital thermometer to test the temperature of the case. I had the digital thermometer measure the temperature at the hottest point of the unit, which is where the hot air comes out, and the temperature ranged somewhere between the mid-20s to the mid-30s. So that's not bad. The unit itself is made out of plastic. The plastic box should be able to handle temperatures like that as well. And then some of you might have some concern about the fuel tank being right here, right next to the heater, and we're going to test that to see how warm it gets. I'm going to build this in this video and test out the temperatures in there, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so there is one thing. The label on the box said that the height of this box is 8.5 inches, but when I went to close the lid had these ribs up here that were hitting the location of the cap. So I just used a Dremel tool, or you could use a Job Max, to just take out some of these rib sections right here, and it fits fine. So this is the Job Max that you could use to cut out the section right here. And if you don't have a Job Max, you could use a Dremel to get in there and cut away. And that's all you have to remove, just a little piece of plastic from there, and it fits no problem. So there's a couple other things that we have to do to make sure that this fits properly. Now you saw that I had been able to fit both of the pieces in, but on the side where I'm going to have the exhaust going out of this box, I want it to be totally flat, and there's a couple little structures right here that I'm going to take my Dremel to just shave those pieces off. So when I mount the heater and it goes in the box here to go out the side, I won't have these rib pieces in the way. So let's get started on that right now. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm just going to do this next rib. Okay, so basically, if you use this case, you want to remove some of those ribs on the side so you have a nice flat surface, and you can maybe see from there what it looks like. The ribs are no longer there. And now the next part of the job is I want to install the heater in the box, but first I need to cut a hole here so that the intake and the exhaust ports can stick out of the side when the unit is operating. And a very key thing is to know where the glow plug is in this unit. A lot of times you'll see that the units are installed this way. Normally the vent goes through the floor of the RV that's using this as a heater, or sometimes it's a boat, but they usually have the pipes going downwards. Now you can put these on the side, you just got to make sure that the location of the glow plug in the unit will be at the top of the unit. It has to do with a weak hole for the fuel, so as long as the glow plug is at the top, you'll be okay. Let's have a look. So this is the air intake part, it just screws off. This piece just opens up, and you can see right there is the glow plug, and the wire is on the other side. If I have the wire side down, then the glow plug will be up, and that's how the unit will be installed in this box. On its side, with these pipes going out the side, and the box will go like that. So just for handling purposes, I'll just put this back together. And this is the silicone base that goes on the bottom. There's also a little hole right here for the fuel pipe, that's how you know. Now what I want to do is be able to trace a hole just a little smaller than the shape of this seal. So what I'm going to do is trace the location of that seal on the inside of the box by just moving this seal right to the end of the pipes, like that. And I know that this is the orientation I want because the wire is on the bottom, which means the glow plug is on the top. And as I press it up against that wall, I can see where the rubber seal is, just on the inside. Then I'll take a pencil and I'll trace out the location of the seal. long as I have the top half of that radius, I'm good. So I could remove the seal now. Put the unit out of the way for a second. Once I aligned it with the marks that I made in there initially, I just went over it with a permanent marker. So I have an outline there of the gasket, and I'm just going to cut that shape on the inside of where that mark is. So I'll use my Dremel tool and just stay on the inside of that line. Now just take a file and just smooth out the edge. So I've got the hole cut in the side. It's a little bit rough, but it'll do. And now I'm just going to test fit the heater in the box. I have the wire side down so that the glow plug is up. I have the rubber seal on the base. I will talk to you about this fuel inlet shortly. Okay, so now the heater is pressed up against the side with the seal pressing against the plastic. And then what you have to do is take these bolts and screw them into the base of the unit. And I've taken now this plate, which is going to go over the holes, and then it'll sandwich between the plastic and the seal of the unit to hold it in place. Also, for this plate to fit, I had to cut it down because the plate that comes with the unit is bigger and it needed to fit in this space right here. And I'm going to talk to you now about this little pipe that comes out for the fuel. I'm going to do something a little radical here. So this pipe won't be coming out here, so this plate can just go on this way. That way it saves me from cutting it, because if I go this way I gotta cut it because of the plastic. So I'll just put it on this way through the holes just to sandwich it in. But let's talk now about what I'm going to do about the fuel line, because normally fuel goes into the unit here. So if I've got the fuel tank in here, I'd have to have it coming out of the box and going into here. And I was worried about that because I thought, well, what about if something catches on it? I could have a spill of some fuel and that sort of thing. So I thought about it, and let me share with you what I'm going to do. So here's the fuel. It comes in, goes along this pipe, and goes into the burn chamber where the glow plug ignites it. So my plan is to cut the pipe right here and then connect the fuel line to this pipe right here and have it exit out of the unit over here to go to the tank. So what's that look like? So as I mentioned, the fuel pipe was up here. So what I'm going to do is drill a hole right over here so that the fuel line connects to that pipe that I had showed you earlier, and it's going to go through the case and come out here on the inside of the box. And you might be saying, Dino, is that a little dangerous because it's inside the heater? Well, let me show you. This is how the unit works. You got the fresh air coming in and it goes over top of the fins, and the combustion chamber is right here, and the cold air passes over those fins to get heated up to exit from the heater. So the fuel line here is still in the cool air, so it should be fine right here, and I'll be testing it, of course. But now what we have to do is cut this pipe right here, as well as drill a hole in the case so that the fuel line can come into here and connect to the fuel pipe. So now this is the pipe I'm going to remove. It almost made it out of the hole, but I'm going to have to cut it. Might be a little hot. Okay. I'm just going to get a pin to clean out that hole. Make sure that the hole is clear. Gonna take the burr off the edge of that a little bit. I don't want the burrs to put a hole in the rubber that goes over the seal here, so I'll just knock off some of the burrs. So I did my best to ensure that the hole has been cleaned up. So the fuel line is going to come out of here and go out of the heater as such. So remember, the fuel line now is going to connect to the pipe, which is just sticking straight down right now, like this, across. So the fuel line will connect to there and then come out of the heater here. So now I have to drill a hole because that's where the fuel line is going to come out. And keep in mind that this is all cold air blowing over and including past where that fuel line is before it gets to the chamber that's getting heated. Okay, let's put a hole right here. Okay, so I used a 9/32 bit to put a hole right here in the top of the case. Well, it's at the top when I orient it in the box this way, it's at the top. But so that's where the fuel line can go through. And I chose 9/32 because it's a comfortable enough hole that it's not too big and the fuel line can go in nicely. And then I'm going to use some electrician's tape to serve as a grommet so that the fuel line will be wedged nicely in the hole and supported and held in place and protected from the edges, you know, so it doesn't get cut from vibrations or whatever. So let's now show how I'm going to connect the fuel line to that pipe. So here's the pipe right here. I've made sure the edges are smooth and that hole is clear. And now that fuel line has to go in through that hole. Now the way the fuel line gets joined to any element in this whole project, whether it's this fuel pipe or whether it's the filter or the pump, what you have to do is butt this end up to the opening or whatever you're connecting it to, and you have to use these rubber fittings. And with these rubber fittings, you cut it about maybe 1.5 to 2 inches, where 1 inch will go on one end of the connection and the other inch of the rubber will go on the other side. Now before you join all this together, make sure that you have your clamps put on like this. And with these a little bit wet, I'm sure that it'll slide in pretty good. That should go about half. Very good. And now this. Okay, I can feel now the nylon fuel line and the metal fuel pipe. I can feel that they're touching inside that rubber hose. So now I'm going to tighten the clamps. So that's on pretty good and tight. And now this is going to have to feed out through the case this way. And since I already fed the lines through the case, shouldn't be a problem. So I can see the fuel line running up along this edge of the case and coming out this hole. I'm just going to mark the fuel line here because that's where I want to put the electrician tape on. So that's just to protect the nylon fuel line. Let's get this put back together. Okay, so here's the nylon fuel line going into the heater. So the fuel line is there. It's not near any moving parts. It's not near any hot parts. It's not near the fan at all because it's up here. So it's pretty good. Okay. So I'm just going to put some electrician's tape on the outside here so that it holds the fuel line from possibly going in, because I don't want that to happen in case it sort of touches on anything. Beautiful. Okay, so now we'll put the seal back on the unit. You can see there isn't need to worry about the fuel pipe anymore. We'll bring the case back. Of course, the wire down below, so the glow plug is at the top. There's the fuel line. Okay, so you can see now the heater is in the case along with the fuel line going into the heater in the case. And on the outside is the air intake for combustion and then the exhaust air from combustion. And there's the seal of the unit right there up against the inside wall of the plastic. And then we'll just put this metal plate on, and it's just a formality just to hold it in place, but the way this is configured, it's not going to go anywhere. And we still have a few more steps, but for now, just to keep it in place, I'll just hand tighten these bolts to keep the heater in place right now. And you can see how I had to cut the plate to fit the box. And basically, it depends on what kind of box you have. You have to take into consideration, is there a flat place right here? This was mostly flat, but I still had to cut the plate to fit this particular case. You'll have to possibly cut it at different sizes if you have a different case. But at least you get the idea of how compact you can make this unit. Okay, so now the heater is in place, inside, held in place. There you go. Here's the unit. I still have to put a hole right here on this side for the fresh air that's going to get heated, and then a hole coming out this side for the heated warm air to go to the Jeep and the tent. But let's first talk some more about the fuel system and a couple other items here. Now, a subscriber shared with me the idea of keeping lots of fuel line in the bottom of the case, so that when I'm running this unit, I could just take the fuel tank out of the box when I'm running it, but when I'm transporting it, it can go back in the box. I'm going to do that if necessary, but when I test it, I'm going to see how warm it gets. But for now, just to show you how nicely this is going to fit, and I'm not really concerned about the temperature. This is the hottest it got over here was in the 30s, which is like a hot summer day, and this won't melt in temperatures like that. And I'm gonna put some vents in the box as well so that the warm air won't collect in the box. Now what I have to do is decide how I'm gonna run the fuel line past the fuel pump and filter and then into the fuel tank. We want to run the fuel line through the fuel pump and filter and then to the tank. Now with the system here, I have already secured the fuel pump in the box. So here's the heater, and the fuel line going into the heater is coming in here instead of from underneath. And now this line is going to connect here to the fuel pump, which is like on a 45-degree angle. And I'll have a link to all the tutorials that explain all the details, but I'll share some along the way. But for sure, check out the tutorials before you start on anything like this from John McKay, because once you look at all those, you'll know exactly what to do. I'm just showing you a certain design here. So anyway, here is the fuel pump mounted on a 45-degree angle. This fuel line has to be connected to here. Then the fuel line would come out to the filter, and then I'll just have some extra fuel line at the bottom here, and then entering into the fuel tank that'll be on top. Now I haven't done the ports for the air out and air in yet. That'll come. Let's just finish the fuel system first. So the first thing I'm going to do now is cut this fuel line to connect to the fuel pump right here. So when you cut it, don't use a pair of scissors because it'll deform this fuel line. Just use an X-Acto knife and just circle around until you cut through. Okay, there you go. Now the direction of this pump is this way. It's going to be pumping the fuel in that direction. So this is going to go right there. And then I need about a 3/4 of an inch rubber there, and then on this side as well. Okay, so I've cut that to length. It'll go right there. This hose has to go on. Don't forget about the clamps. You want the end of this nylon fuel line to touch the end of the pump, because if you don't, there's going to be an air bubble develop in between, and you don't want that. Okay, now it's time to tighten the clamps. Okay, so now we have the pump, which will pump the fuel through this line into the heater. So we'll now put the filter down here with a fuel line connecting it right to the bottom of the pump, and then from the filter we'll connect it to the tank in this area. So the next thing we need to install is this filter, which the fuel goes through then to the pump. And when you install it, there's a little basket in there, and you always have to make sure that the fuel is going into the filter in towards the outside of the little basket, So you don't want to put it this way where the fuel's going in that direction. You want it oriented this way with the fuel going through in that direction. So now we have the filter, the pump, and then into the unit. And now what I want to do is connect the rest of the fuel line coiled below and then eventually into the fuel tank. So here you have the fuel line, and I'll connect it to the tank shortly. There it is, going into the filter, then into the pump, and then from the pump into the heater. And I'm going to leave all that coiled there to give me the option of running the tank outside of this box if I need to. And if I determine later that I'm never going to do that, I could just cut that. But let's now attach the tank. Okay, so I figured out that I'm going to have the fuel nipple at this end of the fuel tank, and I'll keep everything at this end of the box. And the way you do this is kind of tricky. You have to put a hole in the gas tank right here, and this has to be threaded through from the inside. Now there's a rubber O-ring right here. When this is threaded through, this nut and O-ring secure it to the edge of the plastic. So to get this into there, you put a wire in through the bottom and out through the nipple part, and then at the end of the wire you just put a bend in it like this, and now we'll fish this wire through that hole. So a 1/4 inch gives you a nice tight hole there, so you want to make sure you have a good seal. So I'll put the O-ring in there and just carefully spin that down the threads because I don't want to tear it. Now I'm going to tighten the nut on the end. Okay, so once you have the nipple coming through the tank and this nut is on there, you could just put a wrench on it and then hang on to that nipple while you do a couple more turns to tighten it up. That way you get a good seal. Okay, I feel that's pretty tight, and now there's a rubber O-ring on this side and on the inside. So now this is ready to be connected to the fuel line. So there I have everything connected for the fuel system. I've got the fuel tank here sitting on top of all of that fuel line. I can get rid of that later if I wanted. I could also change out the orientation of this tank. I could flip it around. I opted to keep everything at this end so that I have an empty space here, probably to throw the controller in or the wiring when I'm in transit. So all I have to do now is put the opening for the cold air input to get heated in the heater to go out of the output hole that I have to do. And then I also have to do the wiring. So let's do the electrical now. Okay, let's have a look at our progress so far. We've got the heater in the box, we've got the fuel tank in the box, we've connected all the fuel connections, namely how we move the fuel line from outside where these ports exit here at the bottom of the unit. We move that inside as well so it won't get caught on anything. And now you can see I've used the waterproof 7-pin connector here on the outside of the box. I took this off my old heater because this one's going to be more efficient and it'll take up less space. Let's have a look inside as we look at the final touches of the 7-pin connector. So there's basically going to be 2 connections. The first one is going to go to the fuel pump, and that pretty much just slides right over the top like this. And then there's this little clamp that fits over top to hold it in so it doesn't accidentally get pulled out, so that just clipped in. And then we have this connector which goes to the heater. There you go. And now we could just nicely organize these wires right in here, and that's the whole unit. Okay, so this is how the unit is looking so far. We've got the ports, we've got the heater, we've got all the fuel connected, all the electricals connected, we've got the 7-pin connector right here, and And finally, the fresh air input and warm air output flanges have arrived. These are known as blast gates that have a sliding trap door. That's handy when we're not using the heater to keep critters from climbing inside. Plus, they were half price than just a regular flange. I'll have the link in the description. I dremeled the little stud off the trap door to allow it to open fully. I added these small vents that have screens inside, and after testing, if I find I need more ventilation, I'll just put in bigger ones. Also found at the local hardware store, or links in the description. I added some plywood to both sides of the box to give a flat surface to mount the blast gates. I added 3 digital thermometers for testing this unit, one at the hot part of the heater, one at the fuel tank, and one outside. So now let's start testing this. Essentially, the test consisted of my monitoring the running of the heater on high for an hour. So let's have a look at how it's performing. Well, after its first hour, as expected, there's no sign of carbon monoxide leaks, thankfully. And I did this apprehensively, but I was able to touch my hand on the external part of the case right next to the heater, including the metal plate, and I was able to keep my hand on it. It wasn't too hot at all. And that's been after an hour of running on high. So let's have a look at what the internal digital thermometers are reading. So after an hour of running on high, the thermometer above the heater is reading 42 degrees, above the fuel tank it's reading 18, and the one just outside the unit is reading 3. So that's not too bad. Let's see how it feels to the touch. Surprisingly, it actually doesn't even feel as warm as what the temperature on the thermometer is indicating. I could add more vents, but the way it's been operating in its first hour of operating on high, I don't see any indications for alarm. And it looks like it's just in the nick of time that our new compact design will be ready for this weekend's camping trip. Well, it's time to say goodbye to this big clunky tub. It's a little heavy and awkward, and those big tubes take up a lot of space. Now I've got a more portable design. It's a lot lighter, a lot less cumbersome, and the tubes fit into this little box right here. So this will be a lot easier to manage. Also, what you can see is that I now have it vented into the front passenger door. We used to have it in the back passenger door, but it was always in the way when we would try to get in and out. So that's a much better placement. So when we go camping this weekend, we can get in and out of the back a lot easier. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do now and click the alert bell, because next week I'll be showing how I made this window vent, as well as the louvered window vents for the summertime, which not only helps keep mosquitoes out, but the louvers also keep the rain out. Now for some cheaper Jeeper tips. This week's tip is if you have a vented gas cap and you're not sure if with all the jostling some fuel might spill out of the hole at the top of the cap, put a piece of tape over it until you get to your destination, and then just remember to peel it off before you use your heater. And now for subscribers' tips. This week's subscriber tip is sent to us by Bender from Edmonton, Alberta, who's not sending us a subscriber tip, but a subscriber video where he's sharing with us how pleased he is with his construction of his portable diesel heater. Let's have a look.
Today is our first day to use our diesel heater in a case that we built, and I must say this thing works amazing. Inside I have a control that's climate controlled, so I set it for 22 and it keeps it nice and warm in there.
Hey Bender, thank you so much for sending in your video, and I'm sure it's not just me who thought it was pretty cool to see your Jeep out there on the ice using it to go ice fishing. Awesome.
And if any of you have videos or if you have subscriber tips that you'd like to share, please put them in the comments section below, as they may make it in a future video. Thank you very much. Hey, that's it for this week's episode of CheaperJeeperTV. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found it interesting, and if you did, how about giving this video a thumbs up and maybe share it with some other Jeep campers that you know. Until next week, I'm Dino for CheaperJeeperTV. Be well, stay safe, take care.